All right, guys, we are live right now, and I want to welcome my friend Erich Pratt from Gun Owners of America. Erich, how are you doing, man?
Doing really well, Tim. It's great to be with you.
It's good to have you here again. Unfortunately, it seems like every time we get together, there's pressing issues that need to be addressed and of a political nature. I wish we could just do a live stream sometime where we could have a positive conversation about things
just
that went
out
our way for once.
You're right.
Like we could say, hey, you know, we got a pro-gun bill passed. It never seems that we have those types of conversations. We got to change that.
That's right.
So
yeah, well, we're working on that.
I know you guys are, and that's why I support you. And again, it's a big step because I know you do the circuit with the big mainstream media outlets, and it really means a lot to me that you take time out of your busy day and schedule to do a stream with us here on YouTube. And
sure.
And I know my viewers feel the same way. So let's kick it off. First of all, I just wanted to ask you, because I get questions about this all the time, a quick update on the bump stock ban and the GOA's lawsuit that I'm a party to, and what's happening with that? Where do we stand with that right now?
Sure. Well, we are very thankful to have you on as a party to this lawsuit, Tim. Thank you so much. We took it all the way up to the Supreme Court on quick appeals to get a stay. They wouldn't consider it. So right now we have it on appeal before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. It started off in a district court in Michigan, so it's in the Sixth Circuit Court. And we have presented our brief to the appeals court. The ATF now has a deadline this month to answer our brief, and then we have another deadline next month to answer their answer. And then after that, so it'll be sometime in the fall, the oral arguments will start. So that's it. It's still moving forward. So just so people know, I mean, after a flurry of activity in the spring, it just seems like it's kind of gone quiet. I know, but things are still progressing, and so we're very hopeful.
And things like this take time to
Sure.
work their way through the courts. It's not like you're going to get a decision overnight, because each party has to file briefs and motions, and it can take quite some time. And so we're in it for the long haul, and I greatly appreciate
That's
you guys
right.
taking that fight up. And again, having me part of that, because that means a lot that we can make a stand for that. And hopefully we won't find ourselves filing more lawsuits with discussions now turning towards braces. I've heard, I don't know if you've heard the scuttlebutt, but there's been discussions apparently started by Joshua Prince about a possible brace ban as early as next week. Now, I think that post has been pulled from social media, but it started a discussion that kind of went all over social media. And I kind of reached out to some of my contacts, and they were saying, no, they don't really, and this is within ATF, there's been no directive from the Department of Justice for ATF to take any action. So they're not seeing anything on their end. So I'm not really sure that there's anything there from executive fiat, similar to what was done with the bump stock ban. Perhaps legislatively, we're going to see that in September, but I don't know if you've heard anything about that at all. But I just wanted to see what your thoughts were.
I'm certainly glad to hear what you're saying. And Tim, just to let you know, your sound level for me dropped really low.
Okay.
But, I'm really glad to hear what you're hearing from your sources, because quite frankly, our attorneys, even before the recent shootings, had been hearing from their sources in and around the ATF that something like this could be coming down, and that so that afterwards, after the shootings, that this could perhaps be the excuse for that. Now, haven't heard anything official, and obviously everything that we're hearing at this point is kind of the rumor mill. So, just to say it's something that we are watching, and our attorneys are going to be all over it if something does come down. But, I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, that's good to hear. One of the commenters actually said, and this is true, he said some braces, which is ambiguous. We don't know what that means, and he didn't go on to extrapolate as to what he was talking about. He actually removed the post. So there's screenshots out there. When you post something to the internet, obviously it lives on forever, and that's how I became aware of it, because by the time I heard about it, the post had already been removed. So let's talk about, just in general, I mean, one of the things that's everybody's talking about right now, and I think a lot of that has to do with perhaps Dan Crenshaw. I mean, he was kind of the star of the Republican Party there for a while. I know a lot of folks,
Right.
myself included, were started following on Instagram. He has a lot of good policy ideas. And then, we get this support for the TAPS Act, which is a red flag law at the federal level. And, I was trying to do some research on his association with it. I can't find out if he's actually a co-sponsor or not, but I know that he did a joint press release with a Democrat by the name of Brian Babin, and he has expressed his interest or support, which I think he's kind of walked back a little bit. In his last video he posted to Instagram, he said he wasn't necessarily advocating for the red flag laws, he was just wanting to have a discussion. And even trying to walk it back a little bit, that's still unnerving to me, because that's like saying, let's have a discussion about making murder legal. It's like, well, we can, it's like, no,
Right.
you don't do that. There's nothing to discuss there, because if you take a look at the TAPS Act, it's kind of a gross violation as proposed. And I think there's other bills very similar to it being proposed, but it's a violation of not just the Second Amendment, but the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments. It's like they've taken the whole half of the Bill of Rights and just ripped it off with this amendment. And what do you know of the TAPS Act, and what can you tell the viewers about what it entails and what the real threat there is?
Well, as we've looked at it, we certainly have huge concerns about this legislation. I mean, for starters, it creates a huge new bureaucracy, right? I mean, that right there should concern everybody. We haven't seen anything in it directly Second Amendment related, but it is still, any freedom-loving American should be very concerned about what's there. I mean, you're going to have officials devising threat assessments on Americans, trying to determine who might be a threat in the future. I mean, it kind of sounds a bit Minority Report-ish, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it actually sounds like a profiling program, just under a different name. So, our concern is that this could be a red flag law on steroids. So, yeah, obviously there is a concern. From what we can tell right now, the legislation's not moving, and certainly in terms of actual Second Amendment legislation, we have much greater frontal attacks coming our way that we're battling right now.
So let's quickly tie up with the TAPS Act, because there's certain things in there this is what scares me the most, is because it has bipartisan support. Now, granted, there's nothing currently moving, but Congress is in recess until September. And I was listening to a podcast, watching it at a still image of Mitch McConnell's face. And it was on iHeartRadio. And one of my Patreons had sent me the link, and it was disturbing what he was saying. It's about 18 minutes in length, his interview. And I want to say, if you want to look it up, it's on iHeartRadio, and it was Terry Miners is the podcaster, and he seemed to be voicing support definitely for red flag laws, definitely attacking private sales of firearms, what people like to call the gun show loophole, which is nonsense, and then even seemed to entertain the notion of another assault weapons ban. He didn't say no. He said we need to have a discussion about it. It turned my stomach, because everybody's reporting how Mitch McConnell is killing everything in the Senate. I mean, this is coming from the mainstream media and the other side of the aisle, that he's this big stalwart of the Second Amendment, and he's this big obstacle. But it sounded to me in this article, in this podcast, man, he's rolling over along with some other pretty big names like Graham and others.
Yeah, Tim, this is a huge problem, because you've got the president pushing it. Publicly, the president's saying, "Oh, Mitch McConnell will come around," but then, you have an interview like that where it basically sounds like, he's on board at least for throwing the bill out there. And what we're not hearing anything, in fact, to the contrary. When we bring up things like concealed carry reciprocity, their attitude is like, "Oh, no, we don't need to deal with that right now." Well, why not? I mean, That's legislation that would actually save lives, encouraging more people to be armed and be able to defend themselves in these types of situations, or repealing gun-free zones. I mean, my goodness, these killers are targeting areas either where their victims are going to be disarmed, or where by law or by regulation they can't have firearms. So, both of these things, repealing gun-free zones, encouraging more concealed carry by passing the reciprocity bill. I mean, these are things that, as people call into the Senate, as they write their senators. I mean, this is, what can we actually do? What are the positive things that we can do that would make a difference? These are the things that we need to be hammering these things and telling them, this is what, if you're going to be considering all these other things and throwing them up for a vote, how dare you not bring up these things that, for the gun owning community, who many of them voted for you guys and put you into office.
Boy, they're getting really weak-kneed, and nobody seems to want to talk about the fact that the lunatic that decided it would be a good move to walk into Walmart to test their security protocols with an AR-15 and body armor immediately after the 2 recent tragedies, and an off-duty fireman pulled his concealed carry firearm and actually held him there until police arrived. So there was an example of just a regular guy going about his business with his, concealed carry firearm, and he intervened, and we don't know what the guy's real intentions were. He says he was just testing Walmart's security, which is asinine if you ask me, but sure, run with that if that's what you want to go, go with. But obviously we had, again, an armed citizen intervene and stop what could have been another tragedy. And nobody seems to want to talk about that. That's not even being brought up in the mainstream media. It gets mentioned every once in a while, but they don't have an actual discussion about it. The talking heads don't talk about it and the significance of it.
And I'm glad you bring up that situation, that story, because that's one thing. Just, in terms of what can we do, that would be at the top of the list. If you can carry a firearm, do so. It was tragic to hear how many people in El Paso, it's like, the concealed carriers who were saying, I was just going to Walmart, so I left it at home. Those kind of stories are just heart-rending when there could have been several people there. And I get it. How El Paso is, year after year, they have been for many years the safest big city in America. So I get it how you can be lulled to sleep. Just you live and work in a safe community. And so you think, I'm just going to Walmart. But I mean, we have to stop thinking that way. It's not just when you're in the, quote unquote, dangerous parts. We really need to be carrying all the time. So I think that's at the top of the list for what do we do? How can we affect change?
And I think, people always ask, how can I get involved? How can I fight? What can I do? I support pro-gun groups like the Gun Owners of America. What else can I do? And I always tell them, a lot of people don't really believe that it's effective, but it absolutely is effective. That's to get motivated by contacting your representatives, both federal and state. State is playing a bigger and bigger role in this, because the anti-gunners, when they don't see much success at the federal level, they start focusing at the state level, and they've been pretty successful there in various states. So contact your federal and state representatives, contact the president, and there's means to do that through the governmental websites, but also I know Gun Owners of America has a section where if you're not comfortable writing something, you want some assistance, you guys provide that service at free of charge. I mean, I would like for you guys to support Gun Owners of America, but and I don't get any kickbacks from you guys by saying any of this. My support isn't bought and paid for. I support you guys because I know you have a long history of being no compromise, but you guys make it easy for people to actually contact their representatives, and it does make a difference.
Well, it really does. I mean, let me tell you, we to that point, Tim, we have alerts at the top of our webpage where you can just, with a couple clicks of your mouse, send off letters to the president and to the senators. Already we've generated over 1.5 million email messages to Republican senators. This is very significant. I mean, I think it's easy for people to be discouraged when they see just the media assaults, when they see Republicans who've been strong in the past caving and now considering gun control. But let me tell you, I mean, we've been here before. We saw this happening in 2013 after the Sandy Hook shooting. And, by generating and mobilizing the grassroots, we were able to defeat that legislation. In fact, the New York Times, even as a post-mortem, they were actually lamenting how gun control died. But one of the things they credited was the GOA mobilization alerts that just got so many people engaged. Same thing happened after the Orlando Pulse shooting in 2016. Senator Harry Reid, out of frustration, said, gun owners of America, they're worse than bad. But, we played a big role in that. So, see, here's the thing. I think we can kill this. But part of what we need to do is convince Republicans that this is their read my lips moment.
Exactly.
George Bush broke his promise on taxes and he lost the election. I was able to go on Fox News this last Friday night and talk about this, talk about how Trump and Republicans are really in danger of committing that read my lips moment where they just kiss off a lot of their potential supporters. And that message is getting out there. Rush Limbaugh actually on Monday took that Fox News interview and replayed it and reiterated this point. So the message is getting out. I mean, we have to give them a warning. We have to, deliver the heat, and we're doing that. 1.5 million messages to Republican offices, so they're feeling the heat, which is important because, quite honestly, it's usually not the Republicans who have felt the sting of gun politics. Usually it's been the Democrats. President Clinton lamented several times that in 1994 it was the gun control that he pushed that cost him the majority and the control of Congress. And then a few years later, the Al Gore campaign admitted that it was the gun issue that cost Al Gore a lot of votes in very pro-gun Democrat states, and therefore the election went to Bush. Same thing with Hillary Clinton. I mean, she made gun control, centerpiece of her campaign, and it didn't help put her over the top. But, it's not, and here's the message that they need to hear. It's not just Democrats. Senator Kelly Ayotte is no longer in the Senate. Republican from New Hampshire, because she went south on the gun issue. She supported gun control. She thought, she had gun owners in the bag. They had nowhere else to go. And all it took, not every gun owner said, I'm, going to vote for, third party or whatever. It was just enough gun owners who said, with that D rating, there's really no difference between the two. And so I'm either staying home or voting third party. She lost by 1,017 votes. It was that close. See, it only takes a small percentage of the base to bolt or to stay home to make a difference. And so that's why, we really need to deliver this message. And I'm talking a lot about Republicans because let's face it, the Democrats could care less about the gun owning constituency. But the Republicans really do need to worry about gun owners, whether they're going to show up and vote for them or are there going to be enough of their base that are going to say, you know what? You betrayed me, so I'm sitting out this election.
Yeah. And again, a lot of folks don't realize that Trump, I don't think, and this is an assumption on my part, I don't think he has strong opinions one way or the other regarding firearms. I think with that particular topic, he kind of goes with the political winds, whichever he thinks will serve his purposes. And I also know, and people may be shocked to find this out, but Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner are both staunchly anti-gun people.
Yes.
And it recently was posted by the Washington Examiner that Ivanka is secretly contacting Democratic and Republican representatives pushing a gun control agenda. And she is always with their father. If you take a look at media and stuff, when they're traveling around, when they're in various meetings, Ivanka's never far behind. You don't see Don Jr. very often in these political meetings, but you always see her. So she has his ear. And that's concerning to me. And we need to let him know that promise he made in 2016, that the 8-year assault on our Second Amendment ended with his presidency, he's not kept that promise. We've had more of these conversations, Eric, than I care to remember in the last 3 years. It feels like I'm back in the Obama administration where we're constantly battling legislation. And he's supposed to be protecting us from this.
Yeah, and here's the thing, because people wonder, why are the Republicans squishing out? Why are they doing this? It is really loud inside the echo chamber of the Beltway. I mean, and I, most of the people listening here, you live out in the rest of the country. You don't understand unless you've been here and spent any time here, inside the Metro DC area, how loud that echo chamber is. The media really does have a lot of power here, and they can make it seem like this is the way everybody in America thinks. And so given that that's the case, our voice has to be louder.
Yes.
And we've done this before, where, again, going back to 2013, Tim, you remember everybody, even gun owners, were saying something's going to pass after the Parkland shooting. Something is going to pass. And it almost got discouraging hearing our own allies saying, yep, something's going to pass. But nothing passed.
Right.
Now, here we are again today. I'm seeing the same things. There's pro-gunners, there's conservatives saying, oh, something's going to pass. Well, I hope not. We're going to fight this to the end. And that's why I'm saying, folks, if you're not getting GOA email alerts, these are free. Please go to our website at gunowners.org and start getting our alerts. Again, we've generated over 1.5 million already. Grassroots emails to the Senate. Tomorrow, we're going to start a phone campaign. So I want to have you guys on this because this is very important. They need to hear, especially now that they're back at home, they need to be hearing from people out in the hustings. Our voice needs to be louder than what they're hearing from the media.
I agree, and that's the only way we can actually be effective in trying to stop some of this stuff. And I think, and I've said this before, the gun owners tend to believe that Republicans are there to save them. They think Mitch McConnell's going to save them. They think Lindsey Graham's going to save them. They think Trump's going to save them. And they don't want to believe. I wish I had $1 for every time I make an Instagram post saying, hey, look what's going on. And it becomes immediately divisive. People say, well, would you rather voted for Hillary Clinton? No, you're missing the point. We got to hold Trump accountable for his actions. I'm not saying go vote for Hillary Clinton. I'm saying hold Trump accountable for his actions.
Right.
But people immediately go to either getting defensive and using that logic, or they try something else saying, well, no, it's actually he's playing 4D chess, and this is a greater strategy, like what they were saying about the bump stocks. Oh, no, man, he's playing the system. He's working it. This is next level strategy stuff, and you're just falling victim to it. And wait till you see what happens. And there was no 4D chess strategy.
Exactly.
He was dead serious when he said take the bump stocks and make them go away. Sessions.
That's exactly right.
And I also heard that there are currently 3 different proposals on his desk with regards to getting rid of silencers the exact same way he got rid of bump stocks. And so this is what we were saying all along early on with the bump stock debacle. It's not about the bump stocks. It's about what they're doing and how they're doing it. There's a bigger picture. And that precedent was set. And I was naive enough to think this is going to be misused by future presidents when not even a year later, Trump's trying to misuse it again with regards to silencers. So, I wish people would wake up and realize that these politicians need to be held accountable, and they're not always our friends just because they have an R or a D or any other letter in front of their name. You got to take everything they do on an individual basis and hold them accountable for their actions and make your voices heard, because they want to keep their jobs. They love their power. And if enough people blow up their phone lines and fill their inboxes, they start to question their actions. They don't want to lose their job.
Well, that's exactly right, Tim. And that's exactly, again, I keep going back to 2013. That's how we killed gun control, when everybody in Washington was saying something was going to pass. And it was exactly, because it was the same thing playing out, what we're seeing today. It was the same thing playing out then. You had some big pro-gun Senate Republican names who were working on compromises. But they eventually got the message. And after it was all said and done, the media reports came out that the reason they stood the line, held the line and didn't compromise was because they were getting hammered by the grassroots. And so, folks, we're appealing to you. GOA is here in the nation's capital, but our effectiveness really depends on you guys being vocal. Because if we're just telling them, hey, you're in danger of this, making the same read my lips mistake, but then they're not hearing anything, they're going to laugh at us. But at this, if we're telling them that, and I think it's a great analogy, and because taxes and guns are huge motivating issues for voters, and so this is the other. This is a political hand grenade that they're playing with. And so we're giving them the warning, but if they're not hearing from people, they're going to think we're just blowing smoke. And so we really need you guys to, to send those email messages, and then be looking tomorrow if you're getting our alerts. We'll have an alert in your inbox, I know it can be a hassle asking you to grab your cell phone and make a quick call, but you don't even need to talk to the senator or the congressman. Just talk to the receptionist and just register, hey, I'm opposed to all the gun control they're talking about, especially red flag laws. We need to be talking about concealed carry reciprocity. Please pass that on to the senator or to the congressman. That's all you have to do. It's really that simple. They're not going to want to debate you. They're just simply tally, takers. But
right.
That's really important. It really is important to do that, because when they start getting slammed with calls, they get that haggard look, and that bubbles up. It eventually bubbles up to the chief of staff and then to the senator or congressman. Wow, there's a lot of calls coming in, against red flags or for concealed carry reciprocity.
Yep, and this is another important thing. Right now, Congress is in recess. And many times when there's a lot of political activity, things that are hot button issues being discussed that are going to be addressed in the next session of Congress, many times these Congress people will go back to their constituents and have town halls and things like that, but they're in their home offices. This is when you can actually go sit down and meet with them, or at a minimum attend those town halls and make your voices heard. This is where grassroots activism comes into play, and this is how you can actually become involved. It's a lot more than just writing the email or making the phone call. Now you're actually setting some time aside, assuming you have it, and going and meeting with the representative, because that carries a lot of weight. But you also have to remember to be professional, courteous, and be willing to listen to what they have to say, but make your point.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, being courteous is important. One other thing, if you are a contributor to the GOP and they call you, let them know politely, you're not going to get any funds from me until you guys back off this gun control kick.
Exactly.
That sends a message too.
I agree 100% on that one, and we can only hope that people will become more motivated to do this and stop trusting that their representatives have their best interests always in heart, and that they're just automatically going to defend them. One more thing that I wanted to bring up, I was rather shocked by. Ben Shapiro actually voiced his support for red flag laws on Twitter. And this was on August 7th. And he said, red flag laws are a good idea, but they also rely on a measure of public trust and an assumption of good faith by your neighbors. Ben's a sharp guy. Has he not taken a look around at politics in America right now? There's not a whole lot of good faith between neighbors at the moment. And the lack of trust and good faith is being demonstrated daily. I would agree on that point. So maybe he does get it, but why would he preface that comment with red flag laws are a good idea? Now, to her credit, Dana Lash actually responded to him and says, love you to bits, but I disagree on this one. And then he said, let's get together and do a podcast. I'd love to hear that discussion. I don't know if it's happened already or not. I just caught the tweet. And again, it's disconcerting when you have not just leadership within the Republican Party, which many people, again, assume will protect the Second Amendment and other amendments. It's really discouraging when the talking heads that are usually conservative voices start to bend as well. So, and that sends a very bad message to Washington. If Ben Shapiro is going to fold, well, maybe we should listen to what he's saying. You know what I mean? It's like this this never-ending cycle that nothing good comes from.
No, you're right. I hope Dana can talk some sense into him. I'm glad she's reaching out to him.
Yeah, I agree. So, what are some of the other things that are currently going on? We talked about contacting your representatives, talking about urging Trump to do the right thing. What are some of the other things that you would like to bring to the table in terms of awareness to the audience?
Well, I think we've talked about red flags. That's a big one. I think the other two things that are on the table, which you addressed real quickly already, was universal background checks and bans on commonly owned firearms like AR-15s and other semi-automatic firearms. And we just need to let these guys know that they need to hear from us. No, no, no. I mean, these laws have been tried, and they have failed. They've failed to stop mass shootings. California, Illinois, and Florida all have red flag laws, and within the past year, all three of those states have had mass shootings in them. Illinois and Maryland, have about as much gun control as you could conceive. Universal background checks, red flags, bans on commonly owned firearms, and yet, you wouldn't want to live in many parts of Chicago or Baltimore. Those two cities lead the nation.
Oh, yeah.
In the murder rate. So how is it helping them? So here's the point. We've tried all these gun control laws all over the place. They're failing. California, I mean, they probably lead the nation in terms of coming up with ideas to infringe upon the Second Amendment. I'd be hard pressed to think of another state that has more gun control, and yet they lead the nation in the number of mass shootings. So
I know.
How is it helping California? So this is just something we need to keep pounding away. Gun control is a failure. It doesn't stop bad guys from getting guns. We need to have good people remove the restrictions that discourage good people from protecting themselves and their loved ones, like concealed carry reciprocity. At the federal level, state level, encourage your state officials to, if you're not in a constitutional carry state, tell them, we need constitutional carry.
Absolutely. And a number of states have actually gone that route. Back to the assault weapons ban, I read an interesting article on USA Today. Two. There was a good one actually written by Robert Farrago, that formerly of Truth About Guns, which was a very pro-gun article, and to their credit, USA Today published it. But they also published another article from two representatives where they were talking about complete revisionist history regarding the success of the Clinton era assault weapons ban, saying something like 37% reduction in mass shootings or some nonsense, when we actually had a government study that said there were no measurable benefits to the law whatsoever, which is one of the major reasons why it didn't get renewed after its 10-year sunset. So you have politicians out there totally spouting revisionist history, trying to sell the idea that banning inanimate objects and using the term over and over again, gun violence, gun violence, gun violence, as if guns are capable of anything on their own. They're constantly driving this home, and it starts to take root, and you start to get people listening to the conversation, and that's dangerous, especially when we're starting to see more Americans, fewer Americans, I should say, owning firearms. So it seems like our culture is being stripped from us, and there's this narrative being sold to people that gun bans actually work. And it's just altogether, it's just leading up to the storm that really unnerves me, man.
Yeah, to borrow Al Gore's phrase, here's another inconvenient truth. You mentioned that in 2004, the ban sunset, the so-called assault weapons ban sunset. Well, just look at the FBI stats. Compare 2004 to, say, 10 years later, 2014. From 2004 to 2014, the murder rate in this country went down almost 20%. So in other words, after these guns becoming legal, and they've been legal since 2004, we got safer and safer and safer. So just to underscore your point, there was no measurable effect whatsoever that this ban made anybody safer. And to the contrary, I mean, my goodness, you see plenty of examples where that's exactly the type an AR-15 or an AK-47 style firearm is exactly what you would want when you're facing multiple attackers. I had a piece published in USA Today last week where, mine was the opposing piece to their load of
malarkey.
Malarkey, thank you. I was looking for an appropriate word there. But I document a lot of these cases. This year there was a Houston man who used his AK. I think it was 4 or 5 intruders in his home. Last year, oh my goodness, a Florida man used his AR-15 to stop 7 intruders that broke into his home in the middle of the night. He had to fire over 30 rounds. I mean, imagine if all he had was, 10 rounds or less, or just a revolver or something like that. In fact, there's a story from Texas, kind of a tragic story. A woman was facing 2 attackers, and she unloaded her revolver into the one guy, stopped him, dropped him. But then when the other guy heard the click and no bang,
oh boy,
he turned on her, savagely beat her. Thankfully, she survived. But bless her heart, she told the media, she said, I'm getting a better gun. Forget the revolver. I want a gun with more bullets.
Right.
She said so. But, imagine living in a world where then that's not possible. And
right.
So people like, Granny are now no longer able to protect themselves by multiple attackers, or let's say like, the Koreans in Los Angeles, facing riot situations, or in Ferguson, Missouri. I mean, anyway, this is precisely, it's I guess a tragic thing. Criminals will use the types of tools that good people like to use for their own benefit too.
Yep.
In France, a guy used a truck to run over 86 people and kill 86 people. Well, that doesn't make trucks bad. I mean, trucks are a useful thing, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, remember in the 60s and 70s and early 80s, it was all about banning the handguns because that's what criminals are using. Well,
Saturday night specials, remember?
Saturday night specials. Well, let's face it, that's what a lot of good people like to use. So, we shouldn't be surprised when they're using the tools that good people like to use, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be any safer by saying, you can't have it. It's like, cracking down on, drunk driving by punishing the sober drivers. It just makes no sense.
Exactly. One thing I thought was interesting, during the assault weapons ban era, the 94 ban, everybody was restricted to 10-round magazines. Do you think any of the bodyguards of the politicians that passed that law were using 10-round magazines? Do you? Why is it that they get to be treated differently than we do? Right? Why are they the protected class, the special class, the ruling class? And then we serfs have to, abide by the rules. It's no different than when they passed Obamacare. Then you had people, representatives that voted to pass it, exempting themselves and their staff from the law. I mean, that should be a crime.
Yes.
So you impose it on the people, and then you don't even follow it yourself.
That's right.
So one thing that came up was something I did want to bring up, and I'm glad that that Jim brought this up in a super chat. What are your thoughts on marches like perhaps a big DC march?
So let me give you an example of a type of march that I think works really effectively. I live in Virginia. The state group here is VCDL, Virginia Citizens Defense League. They do a fantastic job. They have a march on the Capitol every year. It's usually in January at the start of the legislative session, but they don't do it on a weekend. They do it in the middle of the week. So you get all these, and granted, I know that can be inconvenient because, people on the right, we work for a living and that type of thing. We're not paid activists, so you got to take off work for the day, but, they congregate down there and they have a rally, but then before the rally, they go into the legislative offices and they lobby their legislators. That is really effective. Not necessarily opposed to, the big rally in D.C. I mean, and that can be a lot of fun. But honestly, I think for all the time, effort, and money, there can be more effective ways. Now, if people are going to come, I would say do it in the middle of the week. Do it when Congress is in session so that then you can go in and lobby your own legislators. I mean, then that's really, although I realize that's, then that's going to mute the numbers because, most people, obviously the weekend coming to DC is going to be more effective. But, so when we hear, marches on the state capitals, things like that, I would encourage, do it in the middle of the week. Go lobby the legislators if they're in session. That is highly effective. That is really good use of the resources. Otherwise, I would say, I mean, and Tim, you know how the media plays this game. You have a rally here, even if we had, 1 million people here in D.C., I mean, that would be incredible.
Yeah.
They're going to interview the 15 protesters, give them equal time.
Yeah.
They're going to
use crafty camera angles to make it look better, bigger than it is.
And they're going to lie about the numbers. And quite frankly, the legislators themselves won't have felt any heat. And that's really the key. I love what the late Senator Everett Dirksen used to say, when I feel the heat, I see the light.
Yeah.
And that only comes about by the face-to-face contact, or calling the offices on the phone, or at a minimum, sending, email or letter communication. That's where they feel the heat, because each person that contacts them is, a voter, pro or con. They take the tallies. And so I think that's what's really effective. There can be other good reasons for having rallies and things like that, but if we're talking about actually putting the heat on these guys, so to counteract the heat that they're getting from the media, I think, the personal contacts and, actually, phoning in your opposition is what we need.
Yep, I agree. And to that end, Budget Guns and Gear Reviews did a super chat, and they said, rally at the State House in Ohio, 9/7/19 at noon, Americans Against Red Flag Laws on Facebook. Guys, that's exactly what we need. We need that grassroots activism and people doing things like this in each and every state. We've done it before. Yes. We can do it again. And this is how we get things done. So absolutely. I left it up there for a while, guys. If you're in Ohio, please go by and support these guys at the rally at the State House in Ohio, the state capitol, 9/7/19. All right. I'm just throwing up some super chats here from folks. We've had a lot of people commenting, a few questions. If you guys have a question, we catch the super chats because they're a different color. I think let's see. I say super chat, that's a super chat. This one's for you. This is from the Tyven Show. Please tell Eric thank you, and a big shout out to all the GOA staff and members. Thank you, the Tyven Show, another great YouTube channel out there. Check them out.
Yes.
I'm going to scroll through here really quick because I've missed a few of them. And let's see. Will Erich Pratt be attending the VA Crime Commission next week? Was the question.
That's here in Virginia. We're in fact getting an alert out to our members. I think it meets on Tuesday. Here's the backstory on that. Virginia had the tragic shooting in Virginia Beach. Mm-hmm. Of course, it was in a sense a gun-free zone. In that employees were banned from carrying. And that was very costly, because actually there was a gal there who worked for the city. Her name was Kate Nixon. Actually told her husband she wanted to bring a gun to work because she was concerned about the guy who ended up being the killer.
Wow.
She decided not to bring it because she was scared she would lose her job if she got caught with it. And wouldn't you know, that was the very next day the guy went on the shooting spree, and she was one of the victims who lost her life. It was a very tragic case. So anyway, here in Virginia, we should be talking about repealing gun-free zones, and actually that's what we're pushing, and that's what we're articulating to the commission, which is meeting. The governor had a special legislative session to push gun control. Thankfully, the Republicans rebuffed them, and they did meet for like a half hour, an hour, and then they adjourned. But anyway, they decided to have this commission meet to come up with ideas and things like that. So anyway, we do have a director here in Virginia that I plan to send to the Virginia Commission meeting on Tuesday. But if you're in Virginia, we'll be having an alert out in your inbox either today or tomorrow. So please be looking for that and take action on that. So this is very important because the legislative battle is still continuing. And
got one comment here I just want to address really quickly. Any word on pistol brace legislation? We kind of addressed that at the beginning of the video. So when this saves, you can go back and watch the beginning of the video. Mike channel, which is another great channel. Already asked this, but will GOA endorse in the primaries next year? That seems to be where we aren't doing a good job voting. So where do you guys stand on that?
We do make endorsements in the primaries,
Yeah,
and we are looking to challenge any Republican that goes south on gun control here over the next month coming up. From Lindsey Graham on down, we want to find challengers to take on anybody who's not only violating the Constitution, they're violating their party platform, they're violating their oath of office, and quite frankly, just violating common sense. So if they support gun control, a lot of times the best way to make a big difference is in the primaries. So yeah, absolutely, we'll be involved.
And again, I think I may have touched upon this a little bit earlier, but people get defensive when you start saying, I'm going to hold people accountable for their actions. They go right back to that, like, well, what do you propose we do? If we force all these Republicans to lose elections, it's going to have the opposite effect. Guys, stop and think about the long term. You got to think that these people have to be held accountable. If you just let them get their way, you're going to have the same net result. You're going to wind up with future infringements. So you have to make good on the threats and do things like poll endorsements and make them feel the heat and get people contacting them and blowing up their phone lines. So you can't just sit back and go, oh my gosh, I can't do anything because if I act, it might have the negative, it might have the opposite effect. You can't do that. You have to be proactive and be willing to fight and hold people accountable. All right, guys. Right. Well, I think we're mostly through the super chats. We're coming up on an hour, Eric. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we kind of wind things down?
Well, Tim, I really appreciate you having me on because I think we've covered the big things that are happening out there, the big emergencies. And so, we've talked about what it is that we need to stop, red flags, universal background checks, and bans on commonly owned firearms, otherwise known as so-called assault weapons. And we need to be pushing for concealed carry reciprocity and repealing gun-free zones. And so that's, I think, the big message. We also talk, and I guess now we're just kind of recapping, but, carry a gun. An encouraging story, and you've probably seen it, but in El Paso, safest big city in America, people are running to gun stores, buying guns, they're getting trained, they're going through the concealed carry classes. I read they're just like through the roof.
Yeah.
Guys are saying, and they interviewed this one gal, her husband's in the military, and she said, my husband's been pushing me to get a concealed carry permit. And I just, I didn't want to do it. She goes, I'm doing it now, and better, don't wait until there's a tragedy near you. Let's let this be the wake up call. Right now, you hate to say it like this, but it's true. And Tim, this is true. The next mass shooter is already planning,
yes.
What he's going to do. There's evil in the world. And honestly, if they can't do it with guns, they'll do it with a truck, or they'll do it with a car, or with gasoline and matches. They will find something because they want to make a name for themselves, because the media will give them that. Will put their name all over and their pictures, et cetera. And a lot of these people, psychologists and criminologists have begged the media, don't mention their names, because they're doing this to be glorified even in their death. Makes you wonder, gee, what if we were talking about restricting the First Amendment? Think CNN would go for that? They want to, our ox is being gored, and obviously I'm not advocating that, but, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right?
I agree.
Anyway.
Well, there have been a couple of comments, one about fighting existing red flag laws, and then somebody also did a super chat saying, will GOA fight the 21-year age requirement to purchase firearms in Florida passed after Parkland by the GOP? So there's existing laws that are on the books right now. This is just something I want to add in really quick. So like in Indiana, we live under a red flag law. We've had it for some time, as long as I can remember. And getting a law off the books is far harder than stopping it from getting on the books. So once it makes it into law, now it's you got to fight it in the courts. And when you have 50 states, you have to pick your battles when you have a limited budget. So
Right.
I'll let you address that, but people seem to think that all the gun rights groups have billions of supporters and trillions of dollars, and really you have to work with and I know this from working with you guys and other groups, you have very finite budgets, and you have to pick your battles, right? And there's other groups that have already
Right.
taken up some of these battles. So I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
No, you are so spot on, Tim. Right now, our big thrust with red flags is fighting the legislative battles, because we're fighting it all over the country. There's about 17 states that have them now, but we have fought in every state that doesn't have one, and so far over 30 states have rejected these. We're fighting at the federal level. If we lose at the federal level, they're going to fall like dominoes at the states, because at the federal level, what they're doing is they want to have a big grant, a big pot of money to bribe the states to pass red flag laws. The irony is people like Senator Graham are saying, oh, but there will have to be due process in order to get this money. Well, he just contradicted himself, because none of the states that have red flag laws right now have due process before your guns get taken. So what he just said is, either a lie, which that's probably what it is, or it means that the bill that they're going to be working on and passing isn't going to fund even one state,
Right.
which I don't think is what they're planning. So I think it's just, they're just saying what people want to hear, because they know. I mean, that's the problem with red flags. It's, you throw innocent until proven guilty out the window. You throw due process out the window. They can come get your guns before you have been convicted of anything. Honestly, even accused of having committed any crime. It could just be a fear. They make me scared, and oh yeah, they have guns. I mean, that's how low the threshold can be. So this is really dangerous. So anyway, right now we're fighting this legislatively. We have had some limited success in fighting this. We did fight a case up in Connecticut, helped get a guy get his guns back under the red flag law. I think there will come a time in the future. We want to kill these first legislatively, and then start working to repeal the states that have them.
Yeah.
And of course, that'll either be done legislatively or in the courts. But like you said, I mean, that's going to be an expensive thing. Right now, it's much cheaper just to fight it out in the legislative halls and beat it there.
Right, because these court cases cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars very quickly.
Oh yeah.
So people think that it's it's $50,000 and you're done. No, it's that's why you have to pick your battles. Somebody just said something. I'm gonna try to slide this in. We're right up against the hour. If this hasn't already been talked about, can you explain to me specifically what the VAMA would do to gun rights for men and women? And guys, that'll have to be the last one. As we kind of
You're
wind
probably
things
talking
down.
about VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act.
Yes.
Basically, that is. Well, it's a law that's already on the books. They're reauthorizing it, but in reauthorizing it, they're putting in new language, and that's what the fight's all about. And what they've done is they've snuck in red flag requirements and really expanded it. So now, in a lot of states, it has to be, somebody you're cohabitating with that could bring the red flag argument, or a relative. But now in the legislation that, in this congressional legislation, I think it's HR 1585, it could be anybody you've ever dated could bring this accusation against you. I mean, so, if you started dating, in third grade, fourth grade, it gets preposterous how open-ended this is. So VAWA is very dangerous. We've had, we got our Texas state representative for Gun Owners of America. Her name is Rachel Malone. We brought her up to the Capitol to speak to the legislative offices about the danger that this poses for women. Because here, this bill is being billed as, Violence Against Women Act. So, what they're hoping is that people will just fall over and vote for this, because after all, who wants to go on record voting against a bill that's to help protect women? But she was very cogently articulating the point No, actually, this poses a danger for women because it goes the red flag order can go the other way too,
right.
And we've seen that happen. We've actually seen cases where men have gotten restraining orders to disarm the women that they wanted to abuse.
Wow.
I mean, so. It's horrendously evil and sick. But anyway, all these good intentions, and it's just amazing how that whole system can be abused. I mean, a woman in New Mexico got a restraining order against Dave Letterman when he was on the air because she said that Letterman was sending subliminal messages.
I remember that.
Over his. I mean, just crazy. And you would think, why would a judge ever issue the restraining order? See, and this is the problem with red flag laws. No judge wants to be that guy who denies it and then something happens. So even in a ludicrous case like, this woman getting a restraining order against David Letterman, they initially granted it. I mean, it was just crazy.
I know. And anybody that believes the government's going to act in your best interest when they're given ultimate power of warrantless searches and wiretapping, and that's what the TAPS Act encourages. It's truly the thought police, and worse, because they're going to start, they can go out and start monitoring your online activities, your phone calls, your text messages, and then make a determination whether or not you fit a particular profile, which they'll probably never give the algorithm to, and then they act, which means they kick your door in and take your guns. And people say, oh, no, that's not the way it's going to get implemented. The problem is the TAPS Act isn't federal legislation. I don't want it to be, but it isn't. And all it does is fund and make available 50 different versions of it in each state. And the states like California, New York, and stuff like that are going to implement the worst possible solution to this red flag law. It's going to infringe on multiple, amendments in our rights. So anyway, at no level should you be lulled into thinking that, this might actually be a good idea because, it won't be misused. We can trust the government. Really? When's the last time you could trust any government, including our own? So I don't want to get too much on my soapbox here because we're at the hour mark. And I just want to ask Erich real quick, how can people get in touch with you guys and how can they support the GOA?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the best way, obviously, go to our website at gunowners.org. And, Tim, I just want to thank you. You've been very generous in offering discounted membership for folks. And I know a lot of our members are watching now. And I just, want to thank all you guys who help us be here on the front lines, helping direct the battle and fighting the battle here in our nation's capital. I mean, obviously we can't do it without, help from you guys. So thank you very much. I think other things that would help is, if people are getting our email alerts, that's fantastic. But, spread the word. Get other pro-gun family members, friends to sign up for our email alerts. They're absolutely free. We want to get the word out. We want to direct heat up on Capitol Hill. So gunowners.org is the place where all that happens.
Outstanding. Well, Erich, thank you for your time, guys. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, we are viewer supported, so there will be a link down below, and that's through Patreon. So swing by, consider supporting us. We've been doing this for 11 years now. Can you believe that, man? With the crazy YouTube stuff.
That's
They've tried to kick us off many times, and we're not going anywhere. They're going to have to pull our plugs.
I'm glad you're still here, Tim.
Thanks, man. And we couldn't have done it without our viewers, so thank you guys for 11 years of support. And Erich, thank you again. And if anything changes, just shoot me a text message, and we'll jump on a stream, and we'll get the message out as best we can.
Fantastic. We'll do it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye.